and welcome to day 178 of our Bible reading plan. Today we read 1 Kings 17 through 19, all about Elijah. Let's go. Starts off with Elijah the Tishbite from Gilead coming to Ahab. So he just comes out of nowhere. We haven't heard of this guy before. We haven't heard of his family or anything else. He's just a new prophet that steps onto the scene by the power of the Lord. And he shows up to Ahab, who, as we read about yesterday, is the worst king ever. He considered it nothing to sin in the way of Jeroboam. He was like, bet, and went way bigger. So Elijah says, there will be no rain until I say so. And then he walks away. Elijah goes and he hangs out by a brook where the Lord directs him, and he's fed by ravens. And so even just from this first moment, he's out in the wilderness, probably to keep him from being killed by Ahab right away for saying this and stopping up all the water. And he's there until the water dries up in this brook, showing that the famine and drought has truly taken hold. And then the Lord leads him to the house of this widow, where he's going to perform multiple miracles. First, he says, hey, give me some water and a little bit of bread. And she goes, I can do the water. I don't have any bread. I got just a tiny bit left. And my son and I are going to make one cake with it, eat it, and die. And he goes, just do it anyway. Make me a cake and then feed yourselves. And she's like, how am I supposed to make this little, and by cake, it's like a little piece of bread. But she does it. And then the Lord tells Elijah, and he tells her, as long as you keep serving me, nothing's going to happen to you. And it just never runs out. She has one little handful, but every time she goes back, there's more. It's like the feeding of the 5,000 with Jesus, right? It's just like every time they turn around, there was more to go, and the baskets never run out. And so God is doing this abundant multiplication of resources. The widow's son gets sick, and she now doubts and is like, why are you ruining my life? What sin have I committed against God that would cause this to happen? And he, prays over the kid. He brings him back to life and shows her, and she goes, okay, now I believe that you are a man of God, and the Lord's word from your mouth is true. And so then after a while, Elijah gets called to go back, and he says, go show yourself to Ahab. And so he does that, and he calls out his friend who had hidden away all these prophets, and that's going to come back in a minute, right? So he hides away all these prophets, and he says, go tell him. And the guy's like, dude, this guy pays off, like makes everybody swear an oath saying that they're not hiding you. And anybody who breaks that, he's going to kill. He's definitely going to kill me if I show up and say, here's Elijah, and then you're not there. And he's like, don't worry, I will show myself. And so they have this big confrontation. He goes, you really want to take me down? You gather every prophet of your false gods and bring them up to the top of the mountain. And so he's got all these evil prophets who show up. So 450 prophets of Baal show up to offer these sacrifices. And Elijah says, okay, big test, Israel, we're going to see. You need to stop wavering, stop having 1 foot in, 1 foot out, kind of following Yahweh, kind of following Baal. Pick one, and we'll see which one's the real God. Sets up 2 altars and everything and says, okay, you guys do your thing. You can go first. Do everything to set up the sacrifice to be, burnt sacrifice to be consumed by fire, but don't start the fire. Let your God, if he's real, start it. And obviously they can't. They start cutting themselves. They start doing everything crazy. And these are all worship practices of these demonic pagan gods that, they cut themselves, and they're offering blood, and they're screaming and crying, and they're in ecstasy, and they're dancing around, and chanting, and nothing happens. Elijah starts taunting them. He says, maybe he can't hear you. Maybe he's busy. Maybe he's relieving himself. Maybe he's on a journey, or maybe he's asleep. You need to wake him up. And all of these things are kind of not only ways of mocking this God, saying like, oh, he can't come to you because he's busy right now, he's indisposed, but also they're kind of presenting things that are said not to be limitations or things of Yahweh. Yahweh does not sleep. He does not travel. There's nowhere where he isn't. His presence encompasses all. He is omnipresent and omnipotent, all powerful. There's a contrast being drawn here between who Yahweh is, even in the taunts and these false gods. So then Elijah goes and he prays to God. And of course, fire comes down, and before he even does it, he soaks the thing in water to make sure, like, there's no way this could accidentally spark. You can make no thing, like, it's not spontaneous combustion. God sends fire from heaven and it consumes everything, the water, the trench, the ground, the rocks of the altar. The whole thing is just completely consumed. Israel takes up swords and they kill all of the prophets of Baal, and Ahab flees. And as he's fleeing, Elijah runs and overtakes him and meets him at the place where he's headed. So Ahab meets up with Jezebel and she says, may the gods, not Yahweh. All these people say, may the Lord your God punish me if this doesn't happen, right? But instead, this one is, may the gods punish me and do so severely if I don't make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow, talking about the prophets that were all slaughtered. And so Elijah, for some reason, freaks out and he gets scared and he runs into the wilderness. Like he says, I have had enough, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers. And then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. I believe the reason he says I'm no better than my fathers is that all the different times that all these people have been judged by God, it's for choosing the ways of man and trusting in man and not in God. And even though he's had this great victory, all of a sudden now he's he's like, I can't stand up to this evil queen. How can I do anything against her? And he runs away in fear. And fearing humans instead of fearing God alone is the thing that I think he's caught up in. But the Lord's not done with him. He feeds him. He sends an angel to speak with him. And he says, hey, you've had your nap, get up and eat. And he sends him. And he has this encounter with the Lord where the Lord shows that, like, even in all of these crazy natural disasters that are all around him, right? There's a tornado, there's an earthquake, there's fire. The Lord isn't in any of those things. The still small voice of the Lord calling out over the noise is a whisper. And there's something powerful in that idea that, like, even the whisper of God is not, even on the surface, maybe not as impressive and powerful and scary as all the things going on in this world, but it is the voice of the Creator who is above and beyond all of those things that may threaten us. Elijah goes and, once he hears the plan, here's how God's going to take out all the enemies of Yahweh and really of Israel, this evil king who is corrupting Israel. And he says, here's this whole plan for it. And then he sets him up with a successor. And so Elijah goes and calls Elisha. He's going to be the next major prophet. Today, as I look at this, Elijah is one of the most revered and famous prophets in all of Israel. Even Moses and Elijah are like the two that Jesus speaks with on the Mount of Transfiguration, right? I mean, like, this is a powerful and incredible prophet of the Lord. And even after this amazing, miraculous victory right in the face of all these false prophets of a false demon god, with the fire coming down and consuming the altar and winning this giant victory of taking out all of the prophets of Baal, the threat of the queen is enough to knock Elijah off his game and to freak him out. And I think that's something really telling for us, that even in, and maybe sometimes most of all, in times of victory, in times of great deliverance, when God has really shown up, beware of the drop-off after that. And that there's never a time when we are completely immune to our flesh, where the fear of man, the fear of this world, when those things can get to us, we still, no matter what things we've already accomplished, need to, in every way, at every moment, rely on the Lord. And I think that's the thing that speaks to me. No matter what great things God might do in my life, around my life, through my life or ministry, always relying on Him and never trying to rely on my own strength. The moment I do that, just like Elijah, I'm going to be running for cover and hiding because I can't stand these things. But with the Lord, all things are possible. So I would love to hear your thoughts, your comments, and any questions or anything that stands out to you as you read. Comment in the Bible app, comment on this video. Thanks for reading with us. Keep praying your way through it and be rad for Jesus.